How do you describe Fintech Control Tower to someone who has never heard of it, like me?
The fintech control tower is, so if I let me tell you a little bit about the story, right? So in 2015, we were helping one of our clients at BCG understand the space of fintech, right? You had a lot of buzzwords, there was a lot of threat, there was a lot of fear. Are these companies going to go after the same revenue pools as incumbent banks and traditional insurers? So what we did, obviously, BCG, we looked at revenue pools across products, across business lines in financial services, but then we wanted to map out who these companies were. So very successful at that. But then that client was multiplied by many more in 2016, 2017. So similar to many companies, BCG, we built out of necessity a tool within the organization that turned into a software that turned into a business in itself. And as we have digital ventures at BCG, and also by the nature of speaking with fintechs on a daily basis, that sort of rubbed off. And last year, we kicked off ideation to see, okay, because we were getting a lot of our clients asking us, hey, would love to have access to this data. You always seem to have the best data at the tip of your fingers around fintech. So we ideated with our clients. We wanted to understand, okay, who is our super user? What is the problem that we're solving for? And we started building the fintech control tower. What it is, it features today 27,000 fintechs. We've got our proprietary taxonomy and classification around around business lines, around products, around all the way down to use cases as well, and the technology that they leverage. And this really has been is allowing our corporate clients at every stage of their innovation journey to analyze the trends, right? To see who could potentially they partner with. It's also about open innovation. Who can I partner with? Who can I invest in potentially, or who can I acquire as well, right? Because you might potentially want to go into markets or into a product that, even if you're a B2C fintech, right? Like we have great examples here in Singapore, where you have this fintech that provides sort of micro SME loans, and they partner together with DBS. And for some of those small companies that are too small for DBS, they pass it on to this fintech called funding societies. And once they get too big, they pass it on to DBS. So even if you're a B2C, you can actually partner and build capability in that way.
Great. I have a bunch of questions about the platform proper, but because you mentioned clients, I was wondering who is your typical client for
Yeah.
this? What sector are they in? How big are they? Where are they located?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we have been serving. So we on an annual basis. So obviously, Boston Consulting Group serves corporate clients around the world, right, of every shape and size. And the FinTech Control Tower was initially a fintech business unit. And on an annual basis, we receive roughly 700 requests to support cases, right? So that, and if I showed you the logos, which obviously I can't, it's everyone, right? It's everyone. It's banking, it's insurance, it's telco, it's large technology companies, it's governments, it's public sector, right? Wanting to understand how fast is the space growing? Do I need to regulate it? Or potentially, should I be championing a specific area? How fast is payments evolving? Should I change my regulations around payments, or should I champion topics like RegTech, right? We did a piece actually where we looked at the entire RegTech ecosystem, and the regulators, as you know, I mean, the UK FCA is very active in the RegTech topic, MAS, HKMA, ASIC, APRA, even the Fed in California. And they want to champion innovation in technology. And what they wanted to understand is, out of all of this 700 RegTechs that we had in our database, what proportion was using what type of technology? Because if you're using, for example, cloud, if you're using AI to be able to do all the things that you want to do, as a regulator, you need to have a framework to allow your head of compliance, financial crimes, operations to onboard these companies, right? So there's so much that we do in the space.
Yeah. Yeah, I was interested. You were describing the journey of Fintech Control Tower so far. I'm interested to know, at some point you started competing, I guess, against market intelligence tools that do only this, right? Selling database and data to big corporate clients. Or am I correct to assume that these are also your competition, the CB Insights and Crunchbases of this world, or
Yeah.
are they partners?
They're partners actually,
Yeah.
because what they do and they do really really well is they provide raw data on private and public companies, right? And in the millions. So I think I can't remember top of my head, but I think PitchBook, Crunchbase, they sort of have 3 million companies in their database, right? And cross industry. What we're doing here, first of all, we're not about raw data, we're about analytics and trends and understanding. Pretty much like if you had your we try to box a research team and make that available, right? With the charts that people and type of analysis that people know about BCG, and so what and we're also very specific to fintech, and I think that's competition. I wouldn't say that it is. I think it's very complementary, and that's why
Yeah.
we're partners as well.
Yeah, great. You showed off the platform right before this interview, so it's very granular, it's very speedy as well. It looks amazing. Is it a custom development built in house?
Absolutely. So we have our corporate venture building arm at BCG. And together, I think, again, because we've been working in this space and we've been working with quite a number of, we have a network of venture builders, we have a network of innovators as well. So the minute we started working on this, we actually built a team of people that we knew would be really excited about, creating a research team in a box. And together with our clients, really co-creating with our clients, and our clients being at the moment, the super user today is your research teams within corporates, strategy teams, innovation teams, fintech partnerships teams, and those are the people that when you have the C-suite saying, "Hey, I want to go into buy now and pay later. Buy now, pay later. Can you map me out the space?" They spend weeks in Google. I want to understand what the revenue models of digital banks, and they spend weeks googling or reading reports, and in the end they map out, they mix between e-wallets, neobanks, banks with licenses, payment companies with licenses. So for that we decided to bring this all together, to bring a taxonomy, a classification that is the one that we use as SMEs at BCG,
Mhm.
and to make that available.
Yeah, makes sense. Can companies just go to the FinTech Control Tower website and sign up for a subscription, or do they have to be BCG clients,
Yeah.
sort of a part of a package, or how does
Good
it work?
question. Good question. So, as you know, we are at BCG. The business model works on strategic consulting engagements. We're moving into the SaaS model. So right now, we've actually just launched the beta version. So our big launch is about the beta version that we are going to open it up to a bigger group of corporates today. Corporates at the moment, we've had a really long, really amazing group of corporates that have been over the last year ideating with us, providing us feedback loops. I think over 120 regulators, insurance companies, technology companies, obviously banks, VCs, private equity firms, and fintechs themselves, large and big, because actually fintechs have the ability to self-declare their own data, which is pretty cool.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
that's what we've been doing over the years, right? They've been providing us the data. So so from that perspective, we're looking to open it up for subscription, most likely next year, to those who are not BCG sort of strategic consulting clients.
Fantastic. What are some of the trends that because you rightly described this as your baby earlier in our call, but from what you've seen building this tool, what are some of the trends in fintech that people should be aware of within or outside of the industry?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm gonna throw numbers at you now because I think that this year is just
I love numbers. Throw 'em around.
it's just crazy, right? I gave you a glimpse out of it before. So today, so 18th of November, we have reached $110 billion in equity funding going into fintechs. And remember, in the fintech, the companies that we have in our platform, we're completely purists. We only bring in fintechs, and B2B and B2C. So that $110 billion number is absolutely incredible. To just contextualize it, that's the equivalent of 2019 and 2020 together, or 2010 to 2017. And when you think that between 2010 and 2017, in the fintech world, we developed amazing companies who are now, uh, from a valuation perspective, even more valued than a Standard Chartered, right? Who's 120 something years old bank. And I'm thinking of the likes of Stripe, right? 2017, they were valued at $9 billion, and today at $95 billion, right? Because as vertical champions with the funding, it's allowed them to just create more, just to have more resources, create more products in their catalog, rebundling really everything. So I think from that perspective, those numbers are really interesting, and and as well the spaces that we're seeing, and every space, payments, regtech, insurance, everything to do with accounts, lending. Actually, it's a space that we were really worried. Lending and insurance, we saw a massive dip during COVID last year in the middle of it, Q2 and Q3. But this year, lending, especially around SME banking and SME banking, really, we've seen a huge amount of funding going into that space. And that's mainly not because we've all of a sudden think that SMEs have the ability to pay. It's because as everybody's been moving, migrating to digital, so have small and medium companies. And as a result, you're able to get better data and insights of those companies. So then in return, you're able to serve to serve in them from a credit perspective. And I think that's really exciting, because that number, actually, I think it doubled the equity funding that is going into these companies.
All right. So building on that, what are some of the emerging areas within fintech that are still underfunded or sort of uncharted territory so far, where a lot of the innovation is going to come from in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I've got a huge soft spot for regtech, and regtech to me is a space that still, that it's still misunderstood. I think a lot of individuals, they still see regtech as specifically, a space where it's AML and AML and financial crime. And actually, what regtech is everything around verification, monitoring, implementation, and governance, right? So GRC solutions, reporting, regulatory analysis, risk analysis, data compliance, and management. And when you think for a moment, and I know it's not a super sexy topic, but when you think for a moment, all of the things that we want to do around IoT, AI, blockchain, and the fact that just for the UKFCA, for example, they regulate 60,000 entities in the UK with 3,000 employees, and it costs, just from a regulatory reporting perspective, to do. I think the cost that was brought for was told, the UKFCA told me, was £10 billion to do regulatory reporting from these financial institutions. So for me, regtech is the foundation of all of the possibilities that we can do with technology in a safe and compliant manner. But why is it, why I think it's still misunderstood? Because you're not getting the funding. You're not getting, although we're seeing more and more mega rounds, so investments of 100 million and above to some. I think we saw 8 or 9 of that last year. It's still not enough, right? We still need to really fuel the proliferation of these startups that are really tackling compliance, paper, people, so we can make sure that, as we move to crypto, digital currencies, as we do, digitally onboarding, as payments, that we can do this in a safe and compliant manner.
Yeah, definitely lots of opportunities there. I agree. You already mentioned crypto. That was going to be my next question. The whole nascent, I would say, still in many ways, crypto industry and decentralized finance and whatnot. Is that also part of the trends that you're tracking and that you're informing your clients about?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a crypto perspective, from a taxonomy, obviously they sit in many places, right? They sit as exchanges. They sit as from an exchanges provider, it's quite wide, right? I think you have today about 6,000 crypto coins. So there's a lot that's being tracked there. Enablers, enablers to be able to do payments and so on, because not everybody wants to go into the space, because exactly, I mean, some more mature fintechs that could potentially provide some of this enabling to exchange or to even keep, it becomes difficult because of the regulator, right? It's still very nascent. We're still not very clear about what we can or cannot do in a country. I mean, just here in Singapore, actually, everybody was in a rush to get out of their Binance accounts, because all of a sudden Binance did not have a license, and nobody sort of knew or understood it. That just happened a few weeks ago. So I think for me, that's a really interesting space. We just had here in Singapore the Singapore Fintech Festival, which was all about Web 3.0. And honestly, when we came up with the topic, because I'm an ambassador for the Singapore Fintech Festival, and I provide them with advice, and I work with them closely. But one of the things that everybody was like, what's this Web 3.0? And actually what they did really clever is that they actually set out all of the panels were actually mini lessons, like mini master classes around Web 3.0. And at the end of it, if you answer some of the questions, you will get a certificate on Web 3.0. So that was really clever. But people were asking, why are you doing this? And then Facebook came out with the metaverse, and then everybody went, ah, because then they started understanding, okay, this is, there's value being generated from the internet, and we need to understand it, right? Are we too late? Can we be next? Regulators are asking, how do we regulate it, and so on and so forth. So I think it's an area. So remember, we had the peak in 2017, and then blockchain crypto wasn't very trendy anymore, but I think it's coming back. I think now we have a bit more maturity, we have more regulation, we have more enablers. We're understanding more as well the capacity. With blockchain, obviously you need a consortium. I think more people are coming together, and obviously with Web 3.0, being able to generate value from the internet, you need to create that infrastructure to be able to build, right?
Yeah.
I might move away a little bit, but the way I explain it to people, because I play the game with my kids, Catan. Have you played Catan?
Yes, the colonists of the Catan.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Catan for me is, it's a game where you're basically exchanging commodities to be able to build roads and villages and so on. And it's a game that you play with kids, or with friends. And that's how you understand what Web 3.0 is, right? To me,
Yeah.
a very easy way to understand it.
Yeah, right. It's not just regulators and startups, of course. It's also the big corporates are getting involved as well, in different ways across the world. From the conversation that you have with Expand or BCG clients, do you feel like the legacy incumbents, the traditional companies in the finance space, really understand all the innovation and how fast this is going? Are they playing catch up here, or are they
Yeah.
working with startup? Well, what's happening there?
Yeah, so I think the what's really necessary for incumbents is that top-down mandate, right? Because between someone who knows the existing regulatory regime or how things were done, right, but doesn't want to change, you have to change that, right? So for that, I feel like more and more. Senior management. So there's two ways that I'm seeing big corporates or banks change. Either is from the top management, somebody that maybe was exposed to some of this space, either accidentally or actually was properly onboarded and educated about it, or it's at the middle layer, right? There's a really cool project around AI, and you have to bring that person, from like sideways from another industry, the gaming industry and so on. That person brings another person and another person. The project is delivered on time, under budget, and it's really delivering results. And then I'm seeing organizations that as a result, then, even HR is comfortable with that guy wearing, or the t-shirt, or the girl, it's just more comfortable with that sort of individual, but also more comfortable with ways of working as well, right? And even remuneration, because actually, even though we know that you can earn good money in banking, you can earn more money in tech. So bringing those people in, an engineer, it's a product lead. It's almost like finding a unicorn, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's be very difficult. Okay, let's talk about geography a bit. From FinTech Control Towers Data and Insights, you must have a bit of an opinion as well about how Europe is doing. Of course, we keep track of the funding and what's going on in Europe quite closely. It's the number one, destination for funding, has been for years. Although closely followed by digital health and enterprise SaaS software, but fintech is the number one sector here in European startup land, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular opinions about how Europe is sort of evolving as a fintech hub?
Yeah. So look, I think what's really been interesting is that all of the regions, within Europe, I think first of all within Europe, I think the UK remains the strongest in terms of the funding that they've attracted, right? So year on year, the growth I think has been actually 95%. Wow, yeah, 95%. So actually, year to date, the UK attracted almost $11 billion, basically. And that's been really interesting. And the areas, you asked about the areas of focus. The areas of focus have really been around payments. That's been really interesting, right? Because it's allowed some of these companies as well. You've got SaltPay, for example, that raised quite a large amount of funding. That has really also allowed them to acquire smaller fintechs. And it's almost like, instead of developing that capability, you're collapsing time, right? And that's why I think it's really interesting. And actually, for not for the first time, because we've seen these players as disruptors, but we are really taking them seriously now. Another area that's been really interesting as well is the lending space. As I mentioned before, you had basically a massive round. So the lending space year to date, if you compare it to last year, was, from a growth perspective, was almost 200%. And I think that really tells you something, and especially in the areas around SME lending. So you have companies, for example, in the UK, like Market Finance, that have really been well positioned to provide this recovery loan schemes, and so on, and has really allowed them to really continue supporting this industry, which everybody was really worried about globally, which is the SME market.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to wrap up the discussion, final question on the gaps for innovation within fintech. What are still some problems or barriers to more growth and more evolution in the fintech space today?
Yeah, so there's still two areas, right? We worked with Cambridge on a study. Remember last year there was the COVID fintech study, and we worked with them on that. And one of the surprising pieces that we found was tackling the underserved segment, right? I mean, financial inclusion for me is it's a really hot topic. I live in Singapore, but I've visited Myanmar, Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam. And in there, I think the access to, I think a lot of, in these countries, financial products or fintech is payments, but it doesn't stop there. It's not payments that gets you up, the wealth ladder. You need to build that to be able to generate, wealth. And I think there hasn't been the focus, perhaps in funding these companies that could potentially, help a whole portion of the population get to financial health. However, we see that changing, and it's really because of the mobile phone. I think the mobile phone penetration, not just here in Southeast Asia, but also in Africa, it's really allowing for, obviously, the usage of alternative data to be able to help individuals, have access to lending. Because as banks in South Africa, for example, to have a bank account is $30 a month, and to have the right information to be able to pass on small loans, right? To be able to provide insurance products, to be able to even provide financial literacy, it's key. So that's something really exciting. Plus, it's also more accessible to women. The other piece that I think that it's another area that's really interesting, just because there is no taxonomy, there is no regulation, but we just had COP26, is sustainability and social impact. I think more and more we're going to see fintechs moving into this space, because all of a sudden investors, it's not just impact investors, it's every investor wants to move into this space, right? So I think we are hopefully going to see founders that were potentially turned back get access to funding to be able to develop their ideas.
Yeah, great answers. We're going to leave it at this. But that was super interesting. Thank you so much, Pauline, for sharing insights from your perspective, but also talking a little bit more about Fintech Control Tower. When do you foresee it launching as a SaaS product? You said next year. Is it going to be beginning of next
Correct.
year or at the end of
Yeah.
next year?
We haven't slept or had a weekend for the past year and a half. So we're hoping by sometime in Q1.
Great. And where can people find more information about it, and where can they contact you if they feel the need
Yeah,
to?
absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn, Pauline Wray, Pauline Theobald Wray, actually. Or you can go to the BCG website. You can search Fintech Control Tower. You'll come up to the BCG Financial Services or FI page. We also have a microsite, which is fct.bcg.com. Where you can learn more about the team, you can learn more about our products, some of our clients, and also sign up for be part of the waiting list for beta access.
Great. Well, fantastic. We'll also link them in the show notes just to be complete so people can find it very easily. Pauline, thank you again for your time. That was very interesting, and have a nice rest of the evening.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.